All right, in studio, Lauren Mathews, welcome. Thank you for coming down.
Thanks for the invitation. It's been a long time since I've seen you.
Absolutely. And so you're running for state rep.
Yes.
And Ohio State rep. And is this your first political run, involvement in politics?
This is my first political run, not my first involvement in politics.
Okay.
So I was actually raised in a very political family in Ashtabula County. My dad, my grandfather were both head of the Ashtabula County Democrats. Our family, it's just kind of in the blood. But I've been very involved in the party for about 15 years. So I would canvass a lot. I actually helped one of my friends become the 6th Ward Councilwoman in Warren and kind of working with her behind the scenes. And I even got her involved in politics maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that I started taking her canvassing with me. So first run for office, not first foray into politics.
So far, do you like behind the scenes better or front person?
I like both of them, but for very different reasons. Behind the scenes, I can go out and do the work. Like I can go out and I used to, before I worked for the state of Ohio, I would knock 500 to 1,000 doors a cycle anyways myself. The part of it that I like now on the front end is that when I'm talking with people, I'm asking questions. I'm having that interaction with them, and I love people. So I enjoy that part of it because I feel like not only am I telling them who I am, but then it comes back on the other things. I can ask them about what are their concerns. So I like both sides of it. I would say that being out there as the candidate is far more tiring than being behind the scenes and doing it on your own time.
It's got to be invigorating too, just one-on-one with people, hearing their concerns. They're looking to you to have solutions and to help fix their problems. It's got to make it feel good.
Well, and it's nice because I've spent my entire life working with people. And so, yeah, I enjoy that conversation. My dad always said that, like, the Camp family, there's never been a stranger for long. Because if you start talking to somebody, suddenly you have 1 degree of separation. And then even more so, like I had someone who actually said to me, she goes, well, what party are you? And she goes, that's not how we vote. And I said, well, I want you to take my information anyways. Do you have any questions for me? Because if I'm your representative, I'm still going to represent you.
That's exactly right.
And so it is the conversations about we need to get past everybody not getting along and sometimes actually having the conversations with each other.
And so you've got a lot of insight being in healthcare and working on the human side of things. So your positions and some of your policy, does it kind of go in line with your experiences in that field?
Absolutely. I feel like that I have that experience and some of that pulse of what the community looks like. That I've worked in social services for 30 years of my life now. I say that like
that's an investment,
even
there.
A little bit longer. If I go back to college, it's actually when I started working in group homes with people with developmental disabilities. So over 30 years of actually working with some of our most vulnerable populations. So a lot of my policies do go in conjunction with that because I feel if you can't, there's a thing called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is one of those things you learn in your freshman psych classes that talks about like there's a pyramid of you have to meet people's basic needs before we can move up to what the very tip of it is, which is self-actualization. And you can't expect people to be thriving members of their community if they don't have food, if they don't have steady employment, if they don't have transportation. And yeah, all of my work experience has led me to working with those populations and meeting those basic needs and helping people climb the pyramid.
Yeah, and my concern with the epidemics in with sort of like fentanyl and some of those things, like it's gotten bad in Ohio. So from a state level, what do you think some of the solutions can be done to help with that?
So I think the thing with fentanyl that is one of the scariest things, I think they did one part of it in the legalization of marijuana, because believe it or not, the clean marijuana sold in shops isn't laced with fentanyl. So that's actually a huge part of they've already done it. Now, if they would make the laws that actually help govern what police and judges need to do when people have it in their system, it would make it a lot better. But that was a huge thing for me. And when people asked me my opinion of it, of legalization of marijuana, that was one of my things. They said, fentanyl, unfortunately, is lacing so many other things.
Right.
And it's in all of the drugs that are anything that is purchased off of a street.
Now, do you think decriminalization and a lot of those other substances will help in the same way that marijuana helped with fentanyl?
I think that it absolutely would, because they still have to be the decriminalization of some of those other drugs or things like that, if they're being used. Well, actually, they have to be prescribed then. It isn't just a street drug that you're necessarily picking up. Right. I think when you look at the decriminalization of drugs, so a lot of times it penalizes the wrong people. It penalizes the wrong people. I think if we're going to look at, if we have an ongoing look at it as to where the money is and things like that, I always follow the money. You know, if you want to stop whatever an epidemic looks like, follow wherever the money is. So if you want to look at where there's a bad batch of drugs, follow the money. Yep. And they can do that.
Yeah, and I also, it breaks my heart that so many people are locked up in prisons because of drug offenses, and they're ruined. Like, I mean, for something that, there wasn't a victim. It was something they did to themselves, probably with a little help, could have gotten them through that. Yeah. And now they've got a record, and they've got felonies, and now they're done. I mean, they're cooked. And
I actually worked, I don't even know if you know this, that I actually worked in partnership with the Mahoning County Drug Courts and in Youngstown Municipal Court as a partner through Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. So anyone who had a drug charge that had a supporting diagnosis of a disability, including substance use disorder, they're eligible for those programs. But additionally, those drug court programs, those specialty dockets. But additionally, my agency, I could actually support them in obtaining training and employment. That is a first step to decriminalizing those things. Things happen in people's lives, and they blow up their lives. Yeah. And that's not, those are the people that, for the most part, that we see in drug court, because other people who do have other criminalistic behaviors aren't eligible for the docket. But I look at that as an expansion of this, is that how are we going to expand? And I think that's something that I can do at the state level as a representative to encourage some more of the decriminalization of things. There are people who blow up their lives and they still deserve a chance because they're still good people. They can be good humans. I've met some really amazing people in that line of work that things happened. And now they're back working and they have their children back. But the time that people are spent in prison for nonviolent offenses, or yes, when there is not a victim of it, we need to start working on that and like getting the people who have marijuana charges out of jail. It's legal now.
Yeah. We work with a ton of guys in rehab that we're trying to assemble their lives back together again, and it truly is a psychological disorder of how many times they revisit the things that destroyed everything. And it's been weird because we worked with somebody and talked with them, and they were doing so well. You find out like the next week they were dead, and because they decided to revisit it, it really is heartbreaking.
And it was some of the hardest and yet some of the best work I've ever done in my life, and I did it for 2 years with them, and I miss it every day. I did have to resign my position to be able to run for this office because I was a union employee, and it is a psychological disease, and it is a lot of times genetic. It's a lot of times genetic that you have a propensity for addiction, no matter what that might be, through your family line. A lot of times it's also just people who have extensive trauma. So when I go back and talk about the bottom of the pyramid and taking care of people's basic needs, some of that is addressing the mental health and the trauma that people have had in their life, whether that be witnessing acts of violence, even home environments where maybe it's not so great.
That's rough.
And poverty is its own level of, or its own kind of trauma also, of not having enough, and how do you do better, and how do you step out of that when there's not maybe someone generationally able there to show you how to do it or to help you.
Right. And you're one of the nicest people I know, and I've watched politics like gobble people up and ruin them because of how brutal it is. And have you experienced anything where you're just like, I can't believe this is the way this machine works?
There are definitely times, and I just kind of step back from it and go, we all deserve better. And you don't have to be that way. I've had a couple head-to-heads yeah. with people who are part of that machine. And I can say, I think there's the empathy of this. You can say, I understand where you're coming from. you're coming from a position of this is my job and this is job security. I come from a different perspective on this, is that actually I have a really great job that I can go back to if I don't win in December. I'm very employable. I'm not doing this for the job. I'm doing this because at some point in time, somebody has to stand up and say, we deserve better. We need better. And I've been so civically and community involved and involved with my employment, even with people, that it just kind of came down to my husband was great about, hey, why not you?
Yeah. So
let's go.
Let's talk about that origin. So there had to have been a moment that said, I'm going to do it, and here's why.
Okay, so there was a moment. Okay, so this has been a moment coming for years, though. For years. So there was a time when I was like, I need to step my game up. Like I've been doing doors and helping and volunteering and being at things, and wherever they need me, they call me and I try to show up for the Democratic Party in Trumbull County. And this year, what made it different, because they've been asking me for years, like, Lauren, you would be a great candidate. You know everybody. Like, what? Yeah. Nope, not the right time. I have kids growing up. Mike and I have a really great life together. No, we're good. Last summer, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, pretty much every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, I was either signing petitions out to other people or collecting signatures myself to get reproductive freedom on the ballot. It was a very frustrating time for me. It's difficult to talk to younger generations and have them look you in the face going, what is going on? And so I spent a lot of last summer just volunteering because this is what needed to be done. So from 5 to 7 p.m. on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, this is what I did. So it came back around this year, and they're like, hey, we think you're the right candidate. And I'm like, nope, not the right time. Love my job, not the right time. So I gave them some names. They went and checked for some people. My husband and I on December 10th are driving home from Cleveland. And my phone had been blowing up. We were at a friend's birthday party. And I'm like, yo, what happened? Why are there so many people calling my phone? Finally, I called them back. Mike's on speakerphone in the car. They're like, Lauren, nobody wants to jump in. We still think you're the right candidate. And I'm like, not the right time. And my husband...
Fourth denied. The fourth time, you're like, no.
Yeah. Like it worked for Peter. And my husband said, okay, we'll call you guys back. And basically it was like, kind of hung up the phone. It's like, Lauren, when's the right time? So we talked about it, had some good and bad discussions about it, said, let's not talk about it. Tuesday night, we talked about it some more. Wednesday morning in the middle of the night, like Tuesday to Wednesday morning, I woke up in the middle of the night and was like, I had a vision, kind of like in my dream, of me doing the job. And it really just felt like I was being woken up to say, this is your time. Send me. It's time to go. I got to the office in the morning and texted my husband. I said, I really want to do this.
Game on.
And he called me and we talked about it a little bit. I called my boss before. I actually had a court session that morning. I called my boss and I said, I want to talk with you. I want to talk with legal. I need to know when I need to resign my job because looking at policy, I'm going to have to. Wow. 3:00 in the afternoon, we talked with legal and they said, have you taken out petitions yet? And I went, no. Any questions? And I was like, well, I just regret that I'm not going to be able to give you more notice. And 2:00 the next day was when I transitioned and handed over my caseload to someone else because the petitions were due by December 20th.
Wow.
And I turned more than required in on December 19th. I basically went to events all weekend and talked to people and kind of felt the room for...
Got the signatures,
felt the rooms for people who said, do you think this is a good idea? Basically, I talked to people and turned them in, and here we are.
Well, they say that the candidates who don't want to be candidates make the best candidates, and that for sure is what you illustrated there.
There's someone who I have worked with extensively in the last 2 years who is a very well-respected member of the Youngstown community. And every time I see her, she hugs me and says, greater good, Lauren. Because I'll say, I'm missing you guys so much. Greater good, Lauren. And so when we talk about the muck that is politics, I keep going back to what is the greater good? That this is not a self-serving
It's public
adventure,
service, right?
This
You
is
put
public
yourself
service.
aside.
And I think that's where we've gotten away from so much is that I actually hate the term politician. And I'm like, I keep telling me, listen, I'm not a politician. I'm a social worker. I'm a vocational rehabilitation counselor. Like, no, like, well, you're running for office, so you're a politician. And I'm like, I guess I just don't feel that that's the vibe. That has such a different connotation to it than being a servant and taking care of people, which is what I've done for 30 years of my life. It's how I was raised. So this doesn't feel that different from it. And I have, I can say like, oh, I'm not a politician. I don't have any of these ideas. I do have these ideas because I've actually worked in places that are guided by administrative code and by the revised code. And back in the work when I did work for DD boards, it just rang true in my brain. Like I could quote stuff and tell you exactly which paragraph it was in. And so I understand what do rules and laws look like, and what does real implementation of them look like, in listening to parties who say, this isn't the way this needs to be implemented, this is how this should be written because of these rules. I feel like I've been on both sides of that. And so now is the opportunity to actually have some of that guiding force.
So a lot of the Ohio reps that we talk to, it's not a very easy house to make friends and get work done with allies, right? Yeah. So do you have sort of a strategy to get a group so that you can get function done, you can be effective?
My biggest strategy is I've actually been down and doing I've been going down and watching sessions and just talking to people, whether they be Democrat or Republicans, no matter what letters behind the back of their names. And sometimes the start of a conversation can be, wow, I really like your shoes.
Interesting.
Because both of us like those shoes.
And we're people. That's all we are.
And we are people. And so there is somewhere else that we can meet and find commonality. But if you don't talk to people, you don't find it. So you have to be willing to talk with people. I am willing to compromise, not where it compromises values. There's a difference between things that are inherently bad for people. I will not compromise when it is bad for people. I could never look my mother or my father, if they were still living, in the face if you do things that are bad for people. But I can talk with people, and I think that's where you have to start, is that you start with the other freshmen who are there together, because we'll all be in a training together when I'm elected.
That's it.
And you start with that, and then you start with, oh, okay, so who else has common interests? The state rep-elect, who's going to be the other part of Trumbull County and part of Asheville County. It's not my family. He came through the line at my dad's funeral. I know this young man. I think you start with who are other people that you guys might be able to implement things for our area that are common people. I had a great opportunity shadowing with Representative McNally and spending some time with her and her family and getting to know her, and not just on the website or in the news kind of places, but getting to know her and some of her children.
And McNally's who you'd be replacing? That's
no
that district. Okay, so what district? Who was the seat before you?
So there's actually an incumbent, and it is Nick Santucci, who is new to the seat. This is actually his first term. As noted, the district is a little bit different again because we keep gerrymandering, aka writing new districts. So you'll see on my materials, it doesn't actually say what district I'm in, because I have a feeling that after the next election, it's going to be changing again.
Like,
yes,
in my entire life, every single person hates the gerrymandering, and every Congress or every House just messes up and divvies it up differently. It's crazy.
This is why the initiative of politicians are going to be left out of it. They're not going to be the authorizing bodies for it. It shouldn't be for the people,
Absolutely.
Of the people, by the people.
Why would you not? If it's your interests are that you cut it up so it benefits your campaign or your run, why wouldn't you?
Yes. But it's not right. No. Oh my gosh, this is not for the people, of the people, by the people. No, that's not what any of this intent was.
So how should it be divided? Let's problem solve here.
Okay.
You and we are going to insist that we do this reasonable, objectively, and that is free of politics. Yes. Who would you even put in charge of that so that we know it's free from leverage?
So the wonderful thing is that it's actually the language is in. Have you seen the amendment language for this one? Okay, so I am not opposed to how the amendment language is right now. I'm opposed to how it's been summarized for the ballot, but once again.
Oh, you're going to be a fighter. I can tell.
Well, do you know what? The great news is that if you actually read things, then you see exactly this is how it started and this is what it's become, and you can see the political shift in it. So how you can tell that this is actually a good thing and who is one of the primary proponents for this and is working and has been around speaking for it is a former Supreme Court justice who is a Republican who was sitting there when they're saying, no, we keep telling you this is not constitutional. Justice Maureen O'Connor. It's like, no, this is not constitutional. She was part of that, and she has since then retired. So it's actually going to be some of the retired Supreme Court justices. There's going to be X number who have declared Republican, X number who have declared Democratic, and some who are unaffiliated. But unlike the governor's proposal that we follow, Iowa, it doesn't have to then be authorized by anyone who's in elected office. The one bit of language that is, and I keep trying to talk to people when I'm talking about gerrymandering, they try to share with them, and it makes sense when you can give examples, is that you need to keep together cities. We're not breaking up cities to 15 billion different districts unless you're one of the big threes. Or maybe, that might actually also add in maybe a Toledo, there might be some things around Dublin, Delaware County, but communities of interest. When I look at this new cut, I went, you've got to be kidding me. Because the people of Liberty, the people of Girard, have these same interests as Jefferson, Ohio, as Dorset, as Rome. And I'm naming towns that people don't have any idea exist. But I do because I grew up in Rome. Because my in-laws' family is in Dorset. Because some of my family lives in Jefferson.
And that's rural Ohio?
This is very rural Ashtabula County.
Okay.
But cutting Liberty and Girard away from Warren and giving it to rural Ashtabula County is not communities of common interest. Like, you're never going to be able to get it perfect.
Right.
You're never, and I understand you have to get certain numbers and things like that. But when you look at communities of interest, how can you look at what that cut is? And I think that's a huge part of it. In writing the new maps, they're actually going to go around. They're like the commission that's put together is actually going to go around and have public feedback. Not where you have to drive to Columbus, not where you have to give written public feedback, where you could actually see things in live time and have conversations and have questions. That is what government should look like.
Yeah, and it feels complicated enough that there's going to have to be negotiations between opposing forces on this, but not just with a political lens. It has to be, like you said, an interest of that community and how to be represented.
Yeah, and because, growing up in that rural, because I grew up on a dairy farm. I don't know if you knew this. I
didn't know.
I grew up on a dairy farm. I showed dairy cows.
Okay.
I was in 4-H. I was the star green hand for FFA. Like, rural communities are also still my communities. Like, I get their issues. But when I think about the people of Warren and the people of Rome, they are definitely not the same communities of Israel in what their concerns are.
Yep.
Not even remotely. There's going to have to be, once again, we have to talk to each other. We can't just do it to make sure that it benefits us.
All right. One final question is probably a premature question, but do you have political, aspirations ahead of or beyond the state?
No. We're going to start here. I've never done this before. As I told my husband, I said, I could be there for a 2-year term and go, yeah, I so don't want to do this again. Because you don't know until you know.
Right.
I don't think there's so many things in life until you're in it, you don't know. But I am committed to a 2-year term that once I win.
Once you win, love it.
I set an intention. And And so, no, we'll go from there and see what does that look like? People say to me now, they're like, could you go back to 8 to 4:30 job, a 9 to 5 job? And I said, I don't know. I'm not there again yet. I said, because being out and having conversations with people, maybe the greater good is trying to bring some of that divide back. Maybe the greater good is in a different way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue talking to people, enjoying time with my family and friends, being part of my community, representing my community, whether that be as a state representative for the 64th District, or whether that be as the citizen Lauren Mathews, who, has been around and been forever part of the Warren community. Life's okay either way. And so I'm not going to change that, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, either way, I don't ever see you not advocating for your values anyhow. Yeah. If it, sort of manifests in a way where you can do it in the state capitol, then awesome. But I really appreciate you sharing time with us today and telling a little bit of your story.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and it was great to see you again, Joe. Thanks, dear.